Okay, greetings and welcome to another Covid-19 community update. This one I'm going to be looking at redefining disposable. I want to start off with the ugly statistics. There have been some 2.5 million people infected, or confirmed infected with a coronavirus, and out of that, this is globally around the world, 180,000 people plus have sadly lost their lives. In the UK, that figure is something like 18,000. We don't know the true figures because 18,000 is those that are reported having passed away in hospitals. But we know, of course, that there are those who are in care homes who are not being accurately counted and those who are passing in their own abode. And this is a scandal that we should never, ever truly forget. But what is quite disturbing, for me at least, and my family, is that there seems to be a racial disparity with some of the effects of Covid-19 and the way it affects people from minority communities. We saw that initially with the health practitioners, and we saw that the frontline staff who were really been losing their lives saving others were, well, many of them were from minority communities. But it's deeper than that. Thankfully in the UK they're now starting to monitor and record ethnicity statistics, but in nations like, if we consider America for example, in Chicago, some 72% of those who have passed away from Covid-19 are African American, whilst in Chicago, African Americans only account to 30% of the population. In other Western nations, like here in the UK for example, the story is quite similar. So this is quite terrifying to me, my family and friends, when we know that actually we have an increased risk from this virus. And no, we're not all in this together. Some of us are facing deeper threats and scarier threats than others. But what is also terrifying is actually seeing how the authorities are responding. Now, I'm not sure if some of you saw what happened a few days ago, but there was an officer who, when arresting someone or trying to warn them about physical distancing measures, they made this statement when the young man wouldn't kind of bow to the police officer's authority. They made this statement saying, look, I can make up any reason to arrest you. And it's very scary. I think the officer's being suspended, but it's a reminder that we're not all facing this lockdown and these draconian conditions in the same way. If you're young, if you're from a minority community, and if the police are particularly bored on that day, and if you don't kowtow to their authority, then some people are going to be arrested. And while I'm talking about everyone not being in the same boat in this lockdown, it's a bit noisy around here. I'm not sure if I should hit the main road. But when I say everyone's not in the same boat, it's Thursday. It's almost 7 a.m. in the morning, and I know a lot of people may be tempted to head out to Westminister Bridge today at 8 p.m. to clap for carers and NHS and frontline workers. And I'm going to say, actually, do not go to Westminister Bridge and break physical distance rules, because what we saw happen last week, where police officers were flouting the rules which they are forcing the rest of us to obey. So please, if you're going to clap, Platform indoors. So what else can I share? Oh God, of course. There's the situation of the vaccine. Now, with it being Thursday, many of you have probably heard the news about the human trials in Oxford starting on the vaccine. Now, I'm not going to go into the politics of whether we take vaccines or not, but what I do want to say is that this is not a game. You see, the way it's been presented, you know, we are one of the first, that this is a groundbreaking achievement, everything's rushing ahead, they're putting 22 million into development. All of this is actually not cause for celebration, but cause for reason to be absolutely terrified. You see, there's over 70 trials for Covid-19 vaccines around the world taking place. So the race is on not just to find a vaccine, but to find a product that will be consumed by billions of people around the world. Now, I don't do conspiracy theories, but what I'm going to do is share an article from the Wellcome Trust. Now, Wellcome Trust and me are not great buddies, but one of the things that they announced in this article, which they made really clear, is that a safe trial would actually take around 10 years. And the various phases would be looking at not just whether the vaccine works, but also if there are any side effects, especially when you consider that this is something that could be injected in billions of people around the world. We also know that places like the Wellcome Trust are suggesting that testing takes place in nations that don't have high incomes. Read Africa, read Asia, Latin America. So we have reason to be concerned. And I'm going to draw upon now another source that I wouldn't touch with a barge pole, and that's one from the Tony Blair Institute. Yes, that Tony Blair. I don't normally have time for him ever since his intervention and warmongering in Iraq. But I must admit, and it really irritates me to have to do so, that his report, it uses a good approach to actually outline the strategies that have been used around the world. Now, Blair uses a traffic light system. If you rank them, you'll see number one, around the world, people seem to believe, and this is governments, when I say people, I shouldn't say people, governments seem to believe that opening schools is the first litmus test, it's the first sign that we're recovering from lockdown. The second test is making the wearing of face masks in the public mandatory. The third thing that nations around the world are all agreed with is contact tracing and mass testing. What governments are looking to do is make sure that after the physical lockdown conditions are relaxed, there's an even stringent electronic lockdown. And the fourth option, which is the one that's most difficult to secure according to the TBI, would be what they call shielding. So making sure that vulnerable communities are stuck indoors. And I don't mean it in a pejorative term, because it's actually done to protect them. And governments are mindful that physical distancing measures, lockdown, is actually starting to panic some people. And they don't want that. They don't want their economies destroyed by that. So that's why all these measures are starting to come in, and that's why the electronic lockdown is seen as the best solution. And I find it quite scary that the ICO, who are supposed to protect our data rights, has actually given the government the green light, and that there are newspapers reports going around saying that we as a public consent. Okay, now I've been walking for around 24 minutes, so I'm going to have to wrap this up so I can make my way back home. But what do I want to say? Well, look, let's be clear about this. I'm not going to say it's good news, but we have to remember that many of the people who get COVID-19 actually make a recovery. It's not an easy recovery for many, but we're talking about over 80-90% of people. But what that doesn't mean is that we shouldn't have empathy for those who are more vulnerable. Those who I explained in the beginning of the program, elderly, those from minority communities, those with underlying health conditions. Now, along with all those vulnerable groups, we also have to remember that there are those who are made extra vulnerable due to the lockdown. And in that case, I'm talking about victims of domestic abuse. And why this is particularly galling at this particular time is because we now know that the government has been ignoring hotels who are offering up their spaces for refuge. Anyway, what I want to say in closing is that it's really important that we remember that none of us are disposable, irrespective of what governments would have us believe. So with that, I'm going to say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Please stay safe and stay loved. Ashe.